Well, Nikki, thank you very much for that. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, I have to apologize for the change in the order of speakers, which was due to an very unfortunate technical hiccup, which is actually going to be part of my presentation as well, because this is something we protocol professionals have to prepare for. Now, protocol in diplomatic interpretation, this is the title of the paper, but I'm going to extend that a little bit and also talk about what connects protocol and interpreting. And on that note, let me just say that the previous presentation was very, 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 it was really fantastic, and it brought up a lot of memories about mistranslation, misinterpretation, and because communications, there are a lot of layers, and if you don't take the cultural layer into account, then actually we go south. So protocol and diplomatic interpretation, but I'm also going to talk about the question, is protocol an art or science? I'll try to answer the question, but of course there is no definitive answer. And I'll also like to talk about what puts us where we are. I mean, what makes us protocol professionals? And then the last thing I would like to talk about is whether AI, artificial intelligence, is artificial intelligence coming in? Well, it is coming, obviously, but is it going to be decisive in our profession as well? So will it take over our roles, like as a chief of protocol or an interpreter? Just remember, I'm sorry, I accidentally muted my microphone. So if you remember Star Wars, C-3PO, that was a protocol droid, speaking like 3,000 languages, if I'm not mistaken. And it was not an interpreter droid, it was a protocol droid. So to that vision, we might expect that chiefs of protocol and interpreters would be droids, or at least AI will take our places. Now, what I would like to start with is the fact that both interpreting and protocol is about intercultural communications. We already heard that protocol is an interface, that it is a set of rules to enable interaction between different cultures. It is a glue, as Dr. Elizabeth Cotton said yesterday. That was absolutely fascinating. So yes, it is an interface, a special language that would make it possible for people from different culture and ethnic backgrounds, or between people who have different styles and patterns of communication, to understand one another and to be on the same page. Is a complex and dynamic process that involves understanding and negotiating differences in cultural norms, values, beliefs, and assumptions. So again, it's a common language. It's a lingua franca, which again is connected to both protocol and interpreting. Now, interpreting evolved and developed as a tool and means of, and an integral part of a protocol, a sine qua non, a must-have key enabler thereof. Because as cultures started to open up and started to trade with one another, started to relate to one another, there was a need to establish certain norms, certain rules, how to do that on an official basis. And of course, there was a need to find a common language. So this is how interpreters came into the picture. One of the earliest known interpretations occurred in the court of ancient Egypt, where interpreters were used to translate between the hieroglyphic and hieratic scripts used by scribes and administrators. And similar practices were used also in ancient China. And it was a bit even different because interpreters were trained to translate between written and spoken languages. Now, Lama Lincha was the first, as we know, the first interpreter, according to this sense of the word. She was the Nahua woman who became an interpreter, advisor, and intermediary for the Spanish conquistador Cortes during his conquest of the Aztec Empire in the early 16th century. She was one of 20 enslaved women given to the Spaniards by the natives of Tabasco. This was in the 16th century, as I said. She spoke both Nahua and that was the Aztec language, and also Yucatec, so the language which prevailed on the Yucatan Peninsula. Um, um, in one of the first documented incidences of interpreting, La Malinche and a Spanish priest named Jeronimo Aguilar worked as a team to interpret for Cortes by transferring Nahuatl to Chonto Mayan language to Spanish. Now, she later, I mean, La Malinche, learned Spanish and became Cortes's main interpreter and also consort. She also gave birth to his first son, and uh, and therefore the reputation of La Malinche really shifted over the centuries because first she was judged as a traitor who betrayed her own people and helped the invaders, but others did look upon her as a survivor who used her skills and intelligence to navigate a difficult situation. And actually, this is what interpreters do. And please note that again here, the role is to liaise, so to find a common ground between two different cultures, and protocol does the same. So again, my statement is that interpreting is an integral and has been an integral part of protocol. So the objective was to create a mutually understandable platform that both or all parties would interpret or understand the same way. Um, Now, diplomatic interpretation, the history thereof can be traced back to ancient times when diplomats and envoys were dispatched on missions to negotiate treaties and alliances and other matters of diplomatic significance. And in these early times, diplomatic interpreters were usually chosen from members of the local community who had some proficiency in the language needed for communication. And then as international trade, as I said, and travel in the early modern era started to grow and extend, interpretation became increasingly important as a skill, and merchants and diplomats needed to communicate with people from diverse cultural background. And as a result of that, a specialized school of interpretation was developed or established, and this particularly happened in port cities like in Amsterdam and Istanbul. And interpreters here were trained in multiple languages, and also they were trained in the cultural norms of different regions. So again, there's another common denominator if we compare interpreting and protocol, not compare because that's not the right word, but we assess both. So in interpreting and protocol, there are three major rules we have to adhere to, and this is you have to be neutral, you have to be unbiased, and you have to be confidential. So these three requirements apply to both interpreters and protocol professionals. Now, protocol, again, um, as I said, was a common platform, and it also served as a lingua franca. So certain symbols, certain things had to and did mean the same thing to representatives of different cultures. Now, so this is about relaying messages. This is about getting the messages across. And of course, this has several different forms in protocol as well. We have verbal communications. Now, this is like, interpreters, or that has different layers as well. Just think of President Kennedy when he went to Berlin, I mean West Berlin, and in his speech he switched to German and said, "Ich bin ein Berliner." Now, this was not only to please the locals, but this was again an additional layer of communications. It had an additional meaning, not only what the words in themselves would say. Now, that was a verbal, but let's not forget, as it was said yesterday, that communications is much more nonverbal. So we have, of course, body language, we have symbols, postures, and again, when we just stage an event, which is a protocol, a high-level protocol event, these are very important, often more important than verbal communications. Let's take the first part, symbols, flags, attire, anthem, crests, etc. These are very important. But not only that, it's also important to talk about the body language, postures, movements, whether people are going to stand at a certain part of the event or sit, the speed of movement, just think of a motorcade, the order of appearance of speakers, or even other gestures. When President Bush visited Budapest, on the Gellert Hill, he was going to give a speech, and then he just took a written speech, folded papers from his pocket and opened them, kept staring at them for a while, and then tear them apart and threw it away. That again was a message that again was a layer of communication. Now, just think of a dinner table. And there's a dinner table. With that dinner table, we again relay messages and we want to get the message across. But no matter how nice the dinner table is and how nice the reception is, what our peers are going to judge us upon is how we serve them, and how we relate with them. If you don't, if we don't value them, if we, God forbid, despise them, then they are going to know. But how would they know that? Because meta communications, I mean, the nonverbal part of communications, is much more important than all the others, and that could be a giveaway. I once was with a delegation, a Hungarian delegation of the Ministry of Defense in Bangladesh, and that was a competitive tender for defense industry investment. Try to formulate my words carefully. So, defense industry investment. And again, what the whole thing was about was intercultural communications. Because at the end, and this is especially true in Oriental countries, it was not about the price. It was not about the capabilities. It was not about what one or the other party offered. It was about liaising and relating to our peers. At a certain point, the delegation I was with, making use of the fact that Hungarian is actually not a language. Hungarian is a code, is a secret code, it's an enigma. I mean, no one speaks that language. It is like Navajo used to be in World War II in Japan. I mean, so no one understands it. And Hungarians quite often abuse that fact. I mean, they think that since no one understands them, they can say anything. The things they kept saying at the during the breaks or at the negotiation table about our peers was not really nice. And I just warned them that actually our peers do understand what you're saying. And they said, no, it's impossible. We know from the services, we have the intel, no one here in the room speaks Hungarian. And I said, yeah, no one speaks Hungarian. Everyone exactly understands what you're saying. I mean, as you know, the proportion of verbal and nonverbal communications. So it was just a simple giveaway. So it's very, very important, but we forget that because quite often we just rely on the words being said or written down. And again, similar situations when there are interpreters, and I have been in, I mean, been there, done that. Let me put it this way: that you have to translate something or interpret something which you know is a blatant lie. You know it is absolutely not true. And you're supposed to translate that and relay that message in a very um, authentic and convincing manner, which is not always easy. And you have to be very mindful because the nonverbal part could be a giveaway, like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, what your eye movement, your facial muscles, and so forth. And it is very difficult to master those skills. And of course, it is a question whether the interpreter has been assigned to do that. I mean, the interpreters normally, we think, would be just there to relay the message in a verbatim manner. But in my view, that's not the case. So let me talk about what puts us where we are. I mean, what makes us protocol professionals and chiefs and interpreters. Of course, we are knowledgeable and we're trained in the relevant rules, hierarchies, and customs and traditions, and we normally meticulously follow them. And it is not always difficult to follow these rules. You don't have to know all the rules because these, as it was rightly said yesterday as well, these rules are based on common sense on one hand and based on courtesy. So if you really start thinking about how to do this or that, and you really try to think, I mean, you really use your common sense, then you would find the right solution normally. We also follow the protocol. But of course, as we heard it yesterday, when plan and reality don't meet, if you remember when Ahtisaari was left by the motorcade in the first place, then do we follow the plan as he said? No, I mean, in those cases, we have to be creative, we have to be flexible, we have to be able to respond immediately, like an rapid reaction forces, and we have to manage the unforeseen, which almost always kicks in whenever there is a high level event, even if we don't notice it. Now, um, I think the point here is not whether we apply the rules or whether we apply the appropriate, the right rules. What really matters is how we apply them. So it's not what, it's the how. Um, when there's an event, of course, we do the necessary preparations. We heard yesterday a lot of different aspects we have to take into account. I think here the most important thing is to be able to step out of our shoes. I mean, to put ourselves in the shoes of others, not only our peers who are going to visit us, but anyone who's going to be there at that venue, anyone who could come in either as a viewer, either as a participant, low or high level, doesn't really matter. And then we might find things that might find places where the dots are not really connected and the T's are not really, the I's are not really dotted and the T's are not really crossed. Let's look at the two recent examples of high-level protocol events, which was the burial of the late Queen Her Majesty Elizabeth II and also the coronation of King Charles III. I had the privilege to interpret both events on Hungarian television, which was not easy, I have to say, because of 900 years of traditions and scripts and speeches. But then again, it was really a very honoring thing, and it was really also a very moving thing. And then you were there for several hours watching the monitor, the TV screen, and listening to the input. And apparently, everything was flawless. Of course, the British royal events are normally like that, but were these events really flawless? Well, only seemingly, because there is no event of this magnitude and this importance where there is nothing unforeseen coming in. We just remember when President, again yesterday it was mentioned, when President Obama was in Dublin and the Royal Rolls-Royce broke down. So there are always things like that, and what matters here is not that we can avoid all of these situations, because I think it's possible, all of the hiccups. What matters is good protocol management. Because if there is good protocol management, if there is creativity, and we adapt, then these things are not going to be visible for the outer world. And this is what matters. Because during the coronation, during the burial, apparently or seemingly there were no problems. I'm sure there were, but again, the protocol management was effective, creative, fast, and seamless and flawless. Um, Again, when you're preparing such an event, it is like, and I'm chatting for Air Force people here in the audience, it is like, IFR versus VFR, so instrumental flight rules versus visual flight rules. You're flying blind, and you don't know what is going to come up. But if you're really convinced that you've done everything you could during the preparations and you will be able to respond fast enough, then it's going to be good. So what does it take for us to be there? We have to be creative. Okay. I think what's most important and what most characterizes us is we have to have this out of the box thinking. So finding solutions in every possible situation. Yesterday we saw that flag in the presentation, which was just probably taken out from the box, and it was not really looking good. How that could have been avoided or how that could have been rectified, well, I don't know yet, but if you were there, you probably find the answer. Now, what even is more important, not only for interpreters, but I think for protocol professionals, is to be open to differences and to cultures. So we not only have to know the culture of our peers, the cultural background rather of our peers, but we have to somehow have a positive relation to that. Otherwise, it's not going to be credible and it's not going to be convincing. Of course, the first step to acceptance is knowing and understanding. But then again, if we know and understand, we will understand what causes the differences between that culture and our culture. And once we understand this, I think it is going to be much easier to embrace that other culture, which will help a lot in our communications. Because then again, it's not the words, not the symbols. It is going to be our meta communication, our body language, which I cannot emphasize enough. Now, the other thing which I think is extremely important is the one team concept. What do I mean by that? Whenever we think that, okay, I mind my own business and let others in the whole staff mind their business, it is not going to work or not always going to work. And the simple reason is because let's take the role of an interpreter. It happened to me several times that there were so-called one-on-one meetings between, let's say, the NATO Secretary General and the Minister of Defense of my country, which were really one-on-one. I mean, it was the two of them and me as an interpreter, which means that not even the NATO rep, the Perm rep, knew what was going on and what was said in that room, despite the fact that he was supposed to know and it was important for him to know. Now, when I come out of the room, he would come to me and ask me if I could give him a summary, which is on the one hand against the rules. And on the other hand, it is your national interest to do so. So again, it's not an easy situation, but if you're a team member, you would do it. If you're not a team member, if you're just, minding your own business, you will not do it. And the performance, the overall performance is going to be much worse. Again, there's another layer, and this happened quite recently. One of my students, who is already a very good interpreter, was put in a situation where he had to translate in the field of defense. It was quite a high-level meeting, and something was said by one of the generals, and he just asked, "But sorry, sir, can you repeat that? I don't understand this." And then the answer by the general was that, "Look, you're not here to understand. You're here to translate." Um, in those areas, I sure, okay, but if I don't get the point, I doubt that our peer will get the point. This is what I call ignavia cogitandi. So this is the thinking slothfulness. When you're just minding your own business and you think that, okay, I will perform to the maximum of my capabilities, let others do the same, and then these will add up, and then the team performance will be good. Now, that's not the case. Team performance is going to be much better if you don't perform to the maximum, but the team as a team would bring out everything they could. So I think that a good chief of protocol is like a good station chief in an intelligence service, um, because again, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. So if you only mind your own business and you do not bring others on board, it's not going to work. It's happened to me several times that I asked for the talking points and the documents of the visit, the high-level visit, and then often they would say, well, looks on a need-to-know basis, so we cannot give it to you. And I said, well, okay, but I mean, if you start thinking or twice, you would realize that that's not the right approach. Again, when it comes to protocol and when it comes to this communications we've been talking about, when we are relaying messages to our peers, messages through body language, through symbols, through objects, through appearance, through attire, and so forth, and of course by words as well, my finding is that what matters is not the what, it's the how. So not what you communicate, but how you communicate it, because this is not simple communications. This is intercultural communications. So this is about trying to uh, put the two parties of different cultural background on the same page. Um, Look, no, as I said, no matter how nice the dinner table is, what is going to matter and what you're going to be judged upon is how you serve that food and how you relate to your partners. And for that reason, also in interpreting, there is a norm collision, as we say, so there are conflicting rules. One school or line of school says that interpreters need to good interpreter is invisible if they don't even realize that the interpreter is in the room. Well, actually, I don't share that idea, because if you want to um, if you want to achieve your goal, what you want to communicate, and what you really want to get the message across, it is important to have the verbal but the non-verbal part right as well, which means that it requires a certain interaction. Just think of a poem. A poem or a piece of literature could be performed by anyone, but if an actor performs it, it is going to be much more convincing and much more authentic. Now, I think that interpreters also need to do that. And let's not forget that decisions in the end, at the end of these communications, because with the message we want to relay, we want to achieve a certain result, which requires a decision by the listener, by the other party, and these decisions are primarily born in the subconscious and not in the conscious. So in the two hemisphere of our brains, what really happens in these cases is that based on your unconscious experience, like sense, visual impacts. You just make the decision. You don't even know that you've already made that decision, and then the conscious part, the logical part, the rational part of your brain will try to underpin that decision, that pre-made decision, with arguments and logical reasoning. But again, the decision had been or was made much earlier than this logical underpinning happens. Now, if we put all this together, I'll try to answer the initial question that I asked. Is protocol an art or a science rather? Well, I think to answer this question, first we have to state that protocol is not a trade, in my view. It is not a profession, it is not a discipline. Protocol is a mindset. It is a way of thinking. When you try to understand your peer, you try to express yourself in the best possible manner in a way that the other party would understand it as it is meant to be understood. So again, protocol is not a trade, not a profession. It's a mindset, a way of thinking. And if we start out from that, we can say that protocol is not a science. It's rather an art and not a science. Of course, we need to know the rules. Of course, we need to know all the protocols. This is what we're named after. But again, if you don't have that gut feeling, if you don't have the instinct, if you don't have this urge to relate to the other party, it is not going to work. Now, this brings me to the last part of my presentation, which is about AI. So is it going to happen that all of you, dear colleagues, will be replaced by C3POs sitting there in, let's say, high-level negotiations? Well, yes and no. AI, of course, is faster. It considers much more variables. But again, it is not sensitive to the cultural background. There is no gut feeling. There is no instinct. Um, Invitations, for example, have very strict forms, and I was just given an invitation card for proofreading, which invites the BMAC, the Budapest Military Attaché Corps, defense attaché stationed in Budapest, to the 175th anniversary of the Hungarian Defense Forces. There's going to be a high-level event next Tuesday, and although it was translated into English, I mean, I read the invitation as just as we heard in the previous presentation. It was English, but it was, I mean, it was below the line. Let me put it this way. Because, and I started to think, why is that? I mean, this translator who did that, I mean, apparently his English is good and everything is okay. And then I realized the fact that he was asked to translate the invitation and the cover letter and all the other documents. But that was not the right assignment, because instead of, it should have not been translated, it should have been protocolated. And that's a huge difference. A Hungarian invitation is absolutely different from the one that we use in the English speaking world, which is quite stringent in terms of the formal requirement. Now, again, artificial intelligence, AI, increasingly to help automate various aspects of protocol management and administration, because protocol refers to the system of rules and procedures that we talked about that govern formal engagements and events, state visits and so forth, and high-level events. And AI technology is increasingly being used in these areas in protocol management. So nowadays they use AI-powered platform to assist protocol officers in managing events and automating different tasks like scheduling, sending invitations, tracking RSVPs, and so forth. And AI can also predict the needs of different attendees to offer suggestions for seating arrangements, catering options, and other logistical considerations. So yes, it is coming. And also, it is very likely that AI is going to take an even bigger slice of cake in future protocol management, like, for example, natural language processing, or speech writing and event planning, and will be able to provide more accurate and personalized assistance based on specific requirements of an event. And it is also, AI could be used to predict the preferences of the guests, and could be used to personalize recommendations and logistics and so forth. AI also plays a significant role in interpretation already. AI-powered language translation and interpretation programs are becoming increasingly sophisticated and accurate, and they have a lot of advantages over human interpreters, I'm sorry to admit. But one of the most significant advantage of AI interpretation is the speed, of course. They can interpret languages in real time. They can be used in multilingual communications, and also, it is not as specialized as an interpreter. I, for example, am very knowledgeable in the field of defense and technology and security and a couple of other fields, but there are more fields that I'm not specialized in than the other way around. Now, but despite these advantages, AI interpretation still has limitations, and one of the most significant challenge is accurately interpreting nuances in a language, such as idioms or sarcasm, or the context itself. And although these programs are getting better and better, there is still a long way before they are going to replace interpreters, and there's still a long way before they are going to replace protocol professionals. But I think they are going to be increasingly used, for example, in speech analysis, which is going to be probably part of a job in future. But also, let's focus on the risks that AI means. Now, of course, we heard about mistranslation, misinterpretation, but I think the single greatest risk in using AI in protocol and interpreting is or are the security risks. Most of these AI platforms use the information you feed into them when you ask something, or you want to have something translated, or you want an event planned. All this information is uploaded, and you're no longer in control of those pieces of information, which in case of high-level visits, I think could be very, very dangerous. Now, the other thing which brings me to my final conclusion, why in my view AI and robots are not going to fully replace protocol officers and interpreters, especially in high-level events, in case of high-level events, is because protocol, as we know, is also about luxury. pomp. It is about giving more than you normally give. It is like um, any celebration when you just put in more than what is required, which actually is the definition of luxury. Now, human interaction is always and increasingly so, more precious than a machine interaction. Like, horses versus cars. If there's a high level event, you're going to use horses and you're not going to use cars or motorbikes. Of course, mutatis mutandis. Appearance matters a lot. Or a coffin, whether man carried coffin or it is on a carriage. So, or think of modern hotels. In some hotels nowadays, you just walk in and there is a robot receptionist, which is okay. But I mean, this is not going to be there in 5 or 6 or 7 star hotels because human interaction is much more important. So I think that we are here to stay for a while. Um, maybe our roles will change. We'll have to adapt and will be obviously also assisted more by artificial intelligence. But I think the gut feeling, the instinct, and the emotional part, which is the most important in protocol. I mean, the emotional part of your of brain versus the logical one. Of course, you need both. So that cannot be replaced, at least not in the short run, by robots. So in closing, I would just like to thank the organizers, and I would like to thank, of course, the speakers and the audience as well. And I'd like to thank the entire profession. Of course, I'm very grateful for the initiative, the petition for the World Protocol Day, which is going to be hopefully 11th of May. So 5/11, which hopefully will take away the bad connotation of phrasing dates in this way. But then again, I'm very, very grateful for the organizers for having me. And this is especially because World Protocol indeed matters. And World Protocol indeed matters because it's not the what, it's the how. So this is my conclusion. I think that's the most important in our profession. Again, thank you very much for having me, and I wish everyone a very nice weekend.
Thank